You're listening to the Raiders NFL Draft Podcast. Here are your hosts, Bucky Brooks and Rhett Lewis.
Raider Nation, welcome back. Third episode of the Raiders NFL Draft Podcast, now off and running alongside our former Raider, Bucky Brooks. I am Rhett Lewis, and we are fresh off a week-long tour at the NFL Scouting Combine in Indianapolis. Bucky, always good to kind of get back home and reset a little bit. I know we had a chance to interact with some of our Raider Nation friends from Indianapolis on Raider Nation Radio and all that, but just felt like always good to kind of come back and then kind of try to wrap your head around all the data, man, because there's so much.
Yeah, so much to see, so much to entertain and analyze. And as much as the debate has centered around the combine and why does it matter? Does it still matter? People aren't going. I think this year's combine was a reminder in terms of its importance. We saw so many guys perform well. I talked about it. Look, this is the most explosive collection of athletes I've seen work out at the combine. The numbers that they put up, the way that they ran, all of those things were really impressive. And to be able to have a bunch of talented players go back to back to back in their respective position groups, to me, is a scout's dream. And then we will talk about like the bell of the ball. We'll talk about Fernando Mendoza and what he was able to do despite electing not to work out, how he was able to put some distance between himself and some of the other prospects just by taking care of business behind the scenes in the interviews and the interactions that he had with team brass and team personnel with other teams around the league.
No doubt. And we'll get to some of the freaks, the Styles family, Sadiq, Brennan Thompson, the fastest man, the speed king from the combine this year. Maybe get into some of the offensive linemen who were really impressive as well. But yeah, let's start right there with Fernando Mendoza. First, like official, formal interaction with the Raiders evaluation team. General Manager John Spytek. Fernando said he did walk in and was able to kind of get on the phone with Tom Brady, minority owner Tom Brady, for a little bit, which was super cool and thrilling for him. I got a chance to sit down there with Clint Kubiak and be a part of that interaction as well. So with that, walk us through, Bucky, how you see that process, what's likely going on in those 18 minutes that they get with those guys, right, at the combine in a formal interview setting, and what you're trying to gather, in this first.
Well, it depends on how often you've met the kid prior to, but it's the first really what I would call formal introduction between Fernando Mendoza and the Raiders front office team, including their coaching staff. And what this is, because he doesn't have any character things, it's a get to know you session. There's some ball mixed in terms of what you want, what you know, what you've been used to, how we teach certain things or whatever. And then there may be a slight exchange of maybe a playbook or some things to get ready for his pro day, which is down the road. And so it's nothing heavy. It's kind of like the first impression if they haven't gotten around each other, but it's the first time that the Raiders have had a chance to meet them since they got all the ducks in a row in terms of the coaching staff, who is going to be the head coach, who's going to be coaching the quarterbacks, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Yes. And look, I think that's really cool, right? We've seen in some of the behind the scenes footage from, other teams and other outlets, like you see at times, you're going to put them up on the board. You're going to, ask them some things. You're going to maybe try to, lodge a football question, maybe go back to a personal question, maybe go back to football, kind of back and forth. Cause like the flow of it all and like everything's an evaluation in there. It's not just the question, but it's like how you can move back and forth, how your brain works, how you operate, how you can segment information, how you can keep focus. I just feel like, maybe I'm reading too much into it, Bucky, but like, I feel like there's a lot that could potentially go into it from how you ask, what you ask, and maybe even the order.
Yeah, 100%. There is a lot too, right? Now, if you are one of these teams that's into the gotcha questions and you're trying to throw stuff together, right. We saw how Brian Daboll last year, conducted his meetings with all the different quarterbacks and how he would kind of really put a lot of pressure on them. I don't know if that's necessarily needed in this case. I think a lot of it is trying to build a rapport and the connectivity between the quarterback that you feel confident that you're going to take and the coaching staff that is going to coach him. You're trying to get on the same wavelength and understand how each other best communicates. So you can start building a plan for, hey, when he comes on board, here's how we're going to proceed with him as QB1.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot to Fernando that sure the Raiders could probably see from afar from what he did over the course of 16 games and watching all the tape and watching all the interactions. He's certainly been out there right in front of the media a whole bunch. I thought just in the landscape of this combine, I thought he was really good at the podium. I thought he was relaxed. I thought he kind of showcased a little bit more of his personality. It wasn't quite as much of a presentation as we had seen at times, right? I thought he answered the questions very well. And then one of the other things I loved was watching him interact with the other guys in his group. Mm-hmm. Even though he wasn't throwing Bucky, he was out there stretching with the group. He was out there, dapping dudes up every time they went and encouraging other guys as they were going, even though he wasn't there. He was locked in, right? And I think a lot of times if you're not working out, you can just maybe walking around, talking to other people. But he was right there with his group as soon as they started going, which I just think tells you like what kind of teammate he is, like what kind of, even in that setting, I think there's things you can learn about who he is, even with him not working.
Yeah, look, there's a lot that can be learned. Like, make no mistake about it. We talk about the quarterback position being the most important position when it comes to communication and connectivity. You get a chance to see how he interacts and engages with all types of people at that workout. And you've already done it before, because if your scouts were doing their job when they came in time, you watched him, you watched how he communicated with people, you watched how he engaged his teammates on the sideline. But now you talk about a completely different set of people that aren't his teammates, people that he doesn't necessarily have a prior relationship with. Also, people that he could deem to be competitors. Do you have enough maturity to root for the best in those around you, even though it could work against you? Yeah. To me, leadership comes in so many sizes, shapes, and forms. Do you have the ability to kind of check your own self to be like, hey, no, I want them to do well, because if they do well, it makes the class do well, those things. So you can pick up a lot about the person just in watching how they interact with everyone around them.
I would agree with you on that front as well. And, I think there's a couple other pieces of this. And, I saw him, he was up there, like dapping up Ty Simpson, mm-hmm. right? Who he played, was on the opposite side against with in the Rose Bowl. And, it didn't seem to be, there was no issues there. He is a competitor and a fierce one, but he's also, a guy that has some personality and is going to go out there and want the best for other guys. Now, that said, I thought watching the workouts, Ty Simpson was probably the next guy, was probably the best of the bunch there on the whole. But I don't think those guys as a group really did much to close the gap between themselves and Fernando. Did you see it differently?
I'm with you on that. And I think if you're one of those who is hoping for debate or hoping for a compare and contrast, I think if anything, you walked away saying, okay, if we're the Raiders, we need to cast our eyes on Mendoza. Like, we don't need to kind of manufacture this debate between Mendoza and somebody else. Let's get to the business. Let's make sure we kind of put our eyes on, let's do all the research that we want to do on the kid who we assume or we can confidently feel like he's going to be QB1 or the number one overall pick, and not worry about it. Here's what I will say about Ty Simpson, because there has been some conversation about him being the next one and being close and those things. I think a few different things where Mendoza tops him. One, just the overall prototypical dimensions that you look for. He wins out over him. Mendoza is more of the stature of a prototypical franchise quarterback than Ty Simpson would. Yeah. Ty Simpson's small stature, like under 6'2", 210 pounds. And when the revelation was that he bulked up 15 pounds to get to 210, to me, that's a little worrisome. Lack of experience is also another thing. We think about the big game moxie that Fernando has displayed, the number of starts that he's logged, not only at Indiana, but what about what he did at Cal previously? Those things are there. And then just when it comes to the game, we can talk about Mendoza being able to play for a team that really had most of the games in check, but he did have those flash moments when he needed to finish the game out, he could. And Ty Simpson, you have a dramatic fall off around the 8th or ninth game where the production is what the production is. Those last handful of games, you talk about a sub 60% completion rate, all of that other stuff.
Yeah.
So to me, we try to do that. We try to engage in the devil's advocacy in those meetings, but I don't think we can engage in good spirit. I don't think we can say, hey, this is a debate that we're going to have in these meeting rooms.
So there's been some debate, certainly, about the tape of Fernando Mendoza and Ty Simpson, especially as it relates to first half of the season, second half of the season, which you were alluding to right there. There's been a couple of different folks that have come out there and have, I guess for some reason, made it a point to say that the first half was way more impressive. Way more is a little rich for me.
People have talked about the Missouri game for Ty Simpson and all that other stuff.
Well, but I'm just, my question is like, do we only watch, if we're evaluating a game, is a game only played in the first half, or do we play the second half? Why make an assessment about an incomplete evaluation?
I don't really know.
Is that
I don't really know, and I do also think it's weird. You can't ignore the finish. Like, if anything, the finish right. matters more than the start. Like, it's the way that you finish
against the best defenses. Yeah,
it's the way that you finish those seasons. Now, there are things that you can poke holes on if you want to say, like, hey, well, Fernando didn't have a lot of like pass attempts. Like he had a bunch of games with fewer than 20 games because the game was under control and those things. But I think there are ways to ask around it. Your team is under control. What does he do with those attempts? What do you do in those big game moments, those big play moments when the game is on the line? How did he handle that? And you only can evaluate the quarterback based on what he was asked to do in those situations. You're an undefeated team. You're a national championship team. It wasn't on him to necessarily have to do everything that we've seen some of the other quarterbacks do. So those things are fine. And now it's about, because we're in the TV business, we're in the entertainment business, the debate's like, well, how does he compare to the other number ones or whatever? Like, well, guess what? Those other number ones aren't in his draft. So it doesn't really matter how he compares to those. It's really about who he is, how he fits in the scheme, and what do you need to do to bring out the best of him at the next level. I think that's where the Raiders are beginning to kind of put their focus towards. How can we put the right scheme in place with the right people around him to allow him to play at a high level? And we talked about this. I think Clint Kubiak is uniquely qualified to be able to do it because his time in San Francisco is very similar to what he inherits in Las Vegas. Talented running back, talented tight end. How do you use those guys as building blocks to elevate the play of the quarterback?
Yeah. And look, the final piece of the Fernando Mendoza combine profile was the actual measurements, which you also touched on. 6'5", 236 pounds. Like, look, I'm not saying the guy's Josh Allen, but that's actually like not that far off from the measurements of a bigger kind of quarterback. Like there were even people that were out there on social media, like judging the size of his forearms. Right. I mean, like, and I can just tell you from being around him, like he has been working out, like he has been relentlessly training. And I think it's great to know that a player like that can put that kind of frame together and can, because that's something that's an NFL quarterback frame that's built to kind of handle some of what you're going to feel, right, as an NFL
Absolutely, and that's what you want to see. I mean, you want to see how that plays out. You want a guy who is sturdy, and we talk about durability. And look, man, we've talked about it, and I know you have a relationship with the Manning family. Some of the best traits that they had is their availability, their ability to be around. And people talk about building up the body armor, having the frame to withstand some of the pounding that comes with playing the position. Well, at that size, with that structure, that stature, Fernando Mendoza is better suited to play the game for a long time in the pros. And so you have to like that. You're able to check off those boxes. And then we're on to the next thing. And really, the next thing and the final thing is really what he does at the pro day. And I don't know how much that's going to impact. He's going to throw the ball to his guys and do it. But it begins to give you a little bit of the imagination. He taps into the imagination of the play caller. Okay, when we get him, here are the things that we want to think about. Here are the things that he does this really well. We already know the back shoulder throw is like his thing. We know that's a money ball, a money pitch. I mean, how many times have we seen the back shoulder in a critical situation? What else can we say are his money pitches, and how can we build those into the repertoire plays that we want to make sure that we put together?
Right. And look, I know we spent a lot of time here on the quarterbacks, but when you have the number 1 overall pick and a potential need there, it certainly makes some sense to continue to kind of hammer home every evaluation point that you get with this quarterback class, and the combine is a big part of it. Next one, though, for Fernando will be Pro Day. Mm-hmm. April 1st, where he will throw to his wide receivers. Now, I don't know that he's going to run a 40 or whatever, and I'm not sure anybody really cares at this point, especially after watching the 4th and 5 QB draw for a touchdown in the national title game. But we don't have to go there. What will the Raiders look to? And look, they're going to have their chance to get their hands on him, again throughout the process, whether that's a 30 visit, or whether that's, any of the other exposures, the Zooms and that sort of thing. But for the Pro Day being the next real in-person kind of hands-on thing, what do you look to see from Fernando based off where we are with his profile at this point in that setting, which will be April 1st, just under a month?
He's played so much ball, man. It's really hard to say that you need to see anything. But I think it's just like checking off the boxes, just trying to figure out if you can assess and figure out, are there any weak areas that maybe we have to work around when it comes to his ability to throw to all areas of the field? Is there a problem area? Hey, maybe he doesn't throw the comeback as well. Do we need to discard that? But I think that's just what you're trying to figure out. There's nothing that I can imagine that would happen at his Pro Day that would impact your feelings about him being number 1 overall if you're the Raiders. He's kind of has an extensive resume. He has enough film for you to evaluate. So it's not hey, I need to see these things. You can go back to watch his Cal film to see certain things and how he played in a completely different system. So to me, this is kind of like a mere formality. He has to do it because that's what we expect. If anything, if I'm the Raiders, whether it's at his Pro Day or a private workout, we're beginning to get ready. And I think what's interesting, and I think you may have pointed it to me, where Fernando has talked about, I'm not working out for the combine or pro days. I'm working out to get ready for August and September when we start. So if I'm the Raiders, I'm meeting him at that point. How can we get ready to have a crash course to be ready to be the starting quarterback for the Raiders when it kicks off?
Yeah. Look, he's working out, he's training, he's throwing. And I think it was important to him, from what the conversations that I've had with him, it was important for him, to really be there for his guys at the Pro Day, and really wanted that opportunity one more time to throw with Elijah Surratt, who was at the combine and had a really nice field workout, to throw with Omar Cooper, who ran 4.42 in the 40-yard dash and is now likely a first-round pick. So I don't know, man, any potential visions of reuniting a quarterback and a wide receiver in the same draft with Omar Cooper maybe in the second for the Raiders. I don't know if that it could, but he could go in the first 32.
He certainly helped himself.
So I think, that's something to think about there. Okay, that's the quarterback piece of this thing from the combine. And by the way, there was an absolute freak show at the quarterback spot. Taylon Green was insane. 4.3, 40-yard dash, jumped 11.2 in the broad, 40 over 40 in the vert. Cole Payton from North Dakota State. The Raiders went quarterback from North Dakota State a year ago, but that dude ran 4.5, is built like a freight train, and absolutely launches the ball. Just a couple of little side notes from the quarterback group. But the other freaks, again, not sure. Raiders aren't really going to, unless they want to package some picks and move up again into the first round, not going to have a shot for a guy like Sonny Styles, who took the combine by storm on the first night with 244 pounds, running a 4.46 40-yard dash, jumping 43 in the vert and over 11 in the broad. Whoa. And then his brother Lorenzo Styles, maybe down the road has some consideration, runs 4.27. What's in the Styles bloodline, Bucky?
Man, I don't know, but I do know the late Al Davis would be all over those guys. Those guys would be, one of them would be in the silver and black based on the athleticism and the explosiveness they displayed. But to me, man, it was a fantastic exhibition by those guys, not only in terms of what they had, but I would say the preparation being able to perform on that stage to me was very impressive. Sonny Styles being a guy who is, I would say, overshadowed by Arvell Reese the entire time at Ohio State for most of this journey. So he then goes and puts up ridiculous numbers at his size. We talked about him being a bit of a Fred Warner plus in terms of Fred Warner size in the middle, but the plus ability with the athleticism, and then the fact that he has safety experience in his background. When we think about all the things that this league is doing when we come to the evolution of how people are playing defense with various combinations and sub packages, he made himself more valuable. And I say that even acknowledging that, man, his teammate Arvell Reese is pretty good. He's pretty athletic too.
Arvell Reese in the same group.
I mean, yeah,
also an edge
just
player.
Unbelievable what those guys were able to do. Yeah, man, wow, just wow.
Yeah, just wow. I mean, that's really the best way to put it. I thought, some of the next wow moments came, look, and there's guys, David Bailey, runs 4.50 in the 40-yard dash from Texas Tech. Like, he's going to be gone in the first 5 picks. There was some serious intrigue. Some defensive tackles ran really fast out of that group. And look, they're just not guys the Raiders going to have a shot at number one if you go Fernando Mendoza. But, you looked at Caleb Banks from Florida, for instance. Like, maybe there's a world where he doesn't end up in the first round based off limited sample size playing this last year. But the guy runs 5.04 at 6'6" and 300 plus pounds. And you're like, whoa, like some of the height weight measurements combined with the testing results. This was the fastest combine by positional 40-yard dash average in every group but the quarterbacks. And the quarterbacks were second fastest. Now, this was also the fewest number of players to run a 40-yard dash, right? So sample size is part of it. But are you getting anything from like the way that prospects are showing up, continue to show up bigger, faster, stronger, jump higher, jump further, and run faster than we've ever seen before?
Look, man, I would say that the preparation that we're seeing from these guys, like the exposure to training early on, guys being very comfortable competing with their peers in these things because this is what they've done since they've been in high school. They've gone to all these camps where they've been asked to compete in the fastest man and to do all the jumps and battery of testing to determine who is the most explosive athlete. I love all that. But I will also say this, man, the number of top prospects that competed, to me, that was the most impressive part of it. At a time when some of those guys could have melded in, at a time where people talk about the entitlement due to the NIL era, I would say that these guys kind of putting it down, showing and proving, that was very impressive to me. And I think there's a healthy amount of respect that scouts and evaluators will have for this class based on how they competed and their willingness to compete on the big stage.
Yeah. Yep. No question. Okay, let's get into some of the other, a couple other impressive performances. Kenyon Sadiq from Oregon broke the combine record for a tight end in terms of fastest 40-yard dash, and did so by running 4.39 once the official times came out, which is better than Vernon Davis and Doran Dickerson, who had tied for the fastest at 4.40. I think we all expected Sadiq was going to be one of he's been on our pal Bruce Feldman's freaks list. Like you talk to anybody at Oregon, they're like, go watch Kenyon Sadiq, like absolute just 43.5 in the vert. It was, as good as we have seen from that group in a long time. He, again, probably a player that's going off in the first 32 picks. So I'm not sure you're going to have a bite of it when you come back if you're the Raiders at the top of the second round, but just to put some perspective on the tight end group, he and Eli Stowers, I thought were most impressive in terms of testing. Stowers jumped 45.
Unbelievable. Now, Stowers was a bit of a loaded thing because he was a high jump champion in high school. But both of these guys, the tight end position is one of the positions where you can create the most mismatches. And we see it each and every week with the Raiders. Brock Bowers, what is it? Look, Michael Meyer able to also do it. And as tight ends are returning to prominence. And as teams are using more 2 and 3 tight end sets, this is a very intriguing group to look at. And look, I wouldn't put it past Clint Kubiak and company taking another one just to throw in there because
get a little 12 personnel going with Brock. I mean, let's get it rolling.
Doing a bunch of different things.
It's 13.
Doing a bunch of things to create big play opportunities in the passing game as they run the football up and down the throat to set up these big play action opportunities for Mendoza.
Well, look, it's less likely that there is a high value pick used on a tight end in this class by the Raiders, but a receiver like Brennan Thompson, who runs 4.26 in the 40. Again, another one. Al Davis is up here. Just can we find a way somehow to get the Mississippi State wide receiver on the team? Look, I think that would always be a potential landing spot, right? Just based off history, but I think it's far more likely, or especially than the tight ends, and it's to see an offensive lineman at some point come off the board. And again, this was a record-setting group of offensive linemen. How about the spark plug center from the Iowa Hawkeyes, Logan Jones, running a 4.90? Again, not the biggest dude, but is, has incredible technique. As part of that group that's always really technically and fundamentally sound. There were guys at the top of the class, Olaivavenga Ioane, Francis Mauinoa from Miami, the Utah pair of offensive tackles. Those guys are likely gone in the first. But a player like Logan Jones, might be around, at some point when the Raiders come back up. I think you look at guys like Emmanuel Pregnon, a guard from Oregon, Keelan Rutledge from Georgia Tech, Connor Lew, the center from Auburn. There's definitely some intrigue and some guys that put up some big time numbers. Just kind of curious, any of the offensive linemen that maybe rang your bell?
Yeah, so there are a few different guys, right? Everyone talks about the guys at the top. I thought it was interesting that you brought up Jones. I think,
yeah.
I mean, look, you talk about that. I would say this, particularly as the Raiders are thinking about how they can fill it. Jennings Dunker from Iowa being really, really solid. And I think about the mesh between his game, what he learned from Kirk Ferentz during his time at Iowa, and how that can mesh potentially with Kubiak and Rick Dennison and those guys. I think about Caleb Tiernan from Northwestern.
Yes, from Northwestern.
Been another guy that can do it. Man, people will talk about this class, and we unfortunately don't have enough time to talk about all the players, but there's some really good guys, and if you can target a handful of them in the right spots, talk about the turnarounds happening quickly. We could see quick turnarounds from key units and from the team if you get the right guys plugged in the right spots.
Yeah, sure. And look, I think you're obviously, you're hoping that you get some serious development from guys like Charles Grant and Caleb Rogers, who were third round picks a year ago. And now with a year under their belt, hoping to be contributors. But also, you mentioned Tiernan. Northwestern's put some linemen in the league now. You want to talk about, obviously in Los Angeles with Rashawn Slater, and Tiernan is a guy. I did a Northwestern game this year for Big Ten Network, and just talking to the coaches there was like, all right, we know this guy can move around pretty well. He's smart as they come, as an offensive lineman, but can he get a little stronger, a little nastier, like when we need to? And that was something that they were really kind of pumping up when we were there this year. It was like, this dude has become a little bit more of a complete player with physicality, with edge, and the way that he plays. And so, I think those are some of the improvements that you're looking at from groups like that. So the offensive lineman closed it out. Obviously, some other receivers, just as potential targets down the road as you're trying to support a player like Fernando Mendoza if he is the number one pick. We talked about offensive linemen, but receivers to kind of continue to build that group of targets. I think about guys who were, a guy like Mekhi Lemon, who had a really good field workout, like running the routes, didn't test. I think about players, like that just are, going to be first down guys, going to be guys that can make plays with the ball in their hands. You talked about Zachariah Branch, a spark plug, right? A guy that can get up and go. There were some receivers in this group that I thought, did pretty well for themselves, and ones that will be considered at some point as the Raiders work through this draft beyond the first round.
Like I would keep an eye on, even though he didn't run well, I think he could be interesting in Malachi Fields, who you saw at the Senior Bowl. Despite all the things that people do when they overreact to the 40 times, you saw him. Yeah, you saw what he did throughout his time at the Senior Bowl. He was the buzz coming out of Senior Bowl. I think you want to keep that in perspective. Antonio Williams is someone that some wide receiver coaches tipped me off on. A gadget player at Clemson who's terrific with the ball in his hands, punt return experience. He has some things that are very intriguing. It's a class. Look, it's a class. You talked about you got Omar Cooper potentially being gone in the first round. This was a really, really good group. And how can I forget the Georgia State standout, Ted Hurst, showing and proving as another big player. So there's some guys, day two.
How about 6'5" and 3/8", 216 pounds, Cincinnati wide receiver Jeff Caldwell, who goes 4.31, jumps 42 in the vert and 11'2" in the broad. Best performance, those numbers, the 40, the vert, and the broad, best among wideouts 6'5" or taller at the combine since 2003. Guys, that includes like Calvin Johnson.
I mean, that's bananas. I'm telling you, man, I don't know where these guys have come. These freakazoids have come from. These big, fast, and physical guys that are basketball players that are wearing pads on the perimeter. But it's unbelievable to see these guys in just that kind of speed and explosiveness from tall guys. Uncommon.
Yeah, exactly. And then another name that you might recognize, Bryce Lance, brother of Trey Lance. Bryce had a really nice combine for himself, ran a sub 4.40-yard dash at a vert that was above 40. So, again, there's a lot of different flavors, a lot of different ways you can cut this thing, a lot of different shapes and sizes. But you obviously got to go back and watch and figure out which ones become the best football players for your team. But as potential targets to surround a rookie quarterback with, there's a few of them here to kind of grow from the grassroots level. All right, so that puts a bow on the combine for us. Obviously, we're going to start working our way into pro day season now with colleges and teams. Mentioned Fernando Mendoza's pro day at Indiana is April 1st. We'll certainly get with you guys as we get closer there, but we'll continue breaking down some of these position groups and some of the top guys at these positions. Bucky has done that for you and has laid out his top 5 positional groups, right? And top 5 players at each position. We'll start working our way through that because I know you'll have some updates coming up here as well, Bucky. So we'll kind of continue to familiarize all of Raider Nation with players who could find themselves in the silver and black come Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, April 23rd through April 25th. That's going to do it for us on this episode of the Raiders NFL Draft Podcast. For Bucky Brooks, I am Rhett Lewis, and we will catch you next time.
Thank you for listening to the Raiders NFL Draft Podcast. Make sure to subscribe to the Raiders Podcast Network wherever you get your podcasts.